sometime in the 60s or 70s, after Vatican II. And the joke is that the pericopes were chosen by guys meeting in a Holiday Inn. And that's how it all happened. And kind of it's true. And so the point I'm making is there's nothing sacred about how these are broken down. It's kind of arbitrary. And so sometimes the readings end funny, like, why did it end there? Or why did it start there? Good question. Go ask the guys who did it. Who knows? But we're stuck with it now. We've got it. Now, what's interesting is the pericopes, or this lectionary system, is common across most of Christendom. And so on any given Sunday, these are the readings you'll hear across the church. There are variations. People kind of start and stop at different times. But by and large, it follows pretty much this kind of flow, and this is pretty common. So that's why you might be tuning in on your way home to a radio broadcast from another church, and you hear, wait, that's the same service, the sermon I heard in my church. That's the same text. Why? Because they're using the same lectionary. And it might even be a Catholic church or an Episcopal church that are using the same series we're using. How about that? And it's actually kind of cool if this works this way. Now, it creates some discussion, but that's where this comes from. So that's where the readings arise. The pastor doesn't choose. Now, he can. That's called a free text, when you kind of leave the lectionary behind and go for your own because you've got a reason. That happens. But the lectionary is there and set and given. And that is kind of cool for a pastor, because when you start thinking, what should I preach about this week? Well, there are your readings. You read those, and you go, and you preach. And that's how it works. Now, so is there a format? What's the driving thing? Basically, what you're going to see in all the readings is the gospel drives it, okay? So everything kind of builds around the gospel. So we've got series A, B, C, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and what happens is the readings are kind of chosen for the time of the year. So like during the Advent season, you're going to get stuff from the Gospels about the second coming of Christ, or about John the Baptist, and about, pre-Christmas sort of things. And then during the Epiphany season, you'll get the stories in the Gospels that kind of zero in on the visit of the Magi when you're doing Matthew. Or, Christ going out and reaching out to the Gentiles. You'll get that kind of stuff in the Epiphany. So depending on the church year, they'll pick the gospel readings. But now, what part of the church year are we in today? What's this season called? Trinity season. Used to be called Trinity. Now sometimes we'll call it Sundays after Pentecost. And it's just this long season. It's about half of the year that goes all the way from Pentecost until Advent. Yeah, so we're in this for a long time. This is sometimes called the green season, and the colors of the paraments are green, and it's a long season of the church. So during this time of year, basically the readings tend to be about the life of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, lots of parables, lots of stories, that kind of stuff. Then you get the gospel about, Jesus at, Easter and all that stuff. You get that obviously in Lent and Easter, all that kind of stuff. So it has its own flavor. So basically what happens is the pericopes more or less kind of just march through the gospel during the season of Trinity, or the Pentecost Sundays. And that's what we're doing. So last week we read the story about the seed being sown, remember? And the seed just grows. He doesn't know how, but it happens. Before that you had the parable of the sower, because it's just basically walking through Mark. Next week the readings will be from Mark 5, because that's the next chapter. So you kind of just work your way through the Gospel of Mark, pick out the highlights. And kind of by choice. What parts do we like? What should we leave out? And you make those choices. Now, over the course of 3 years, you cover a lot of the Bible, a lot of the New Testament, but you're not going to cover all of it. But that's how the pericopes work. So, the gospel reading kind of is the anchor reading. And then, if you're sitting around in the hotel room at the Holiday Inn trying to figure out what to do next, you probably go next to the Old Testament. And the Old Testament reading is almost always chosen to somehow mesh with the gospel reading. And so you're going to see a connection almost always, if you think about it, between the Gospel and the Old Testament. And you'll say, oh, that's why they picked the Old Testament, because of this. But they don't start with the Old Testament and then pick a Gospel to match. They start with the Gospel, get an Old Testament to match their Gospel. So that's kind of what's going on. You'll see this. Then we have this third reading, the Epistle. The epistles are usually kind of a one-off, because the epistle readings usually just kind of pick a letter and just crank right through it. And they don't care what's going on with the Old Testament or Gospel. They just crank through the epistle. And that's exactly what we got going here. Right now, we're cranking through 2 Corinthians. And so we're just kind of marching through the book of 2 Corinthians. And you'll see that. Next week, you're just going to keep on moving forward through the chapters and just bang, 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 bang. And they'll skip sometimes whole big chunks. I thought it was cool, but pericope guys, they don't like it. so it got left out. And so that's how the epistles work. Sometimes you'll see a connection between Old Testament and Gospel and Epistle, but it's almost usually kind of by accident. Or maybe they'll finagle it a little bit, but they ordinarily kind of just march through the epistles in order. And that's sometimes called seriatim reading, where you just kind of read it in order, just kind of crank through the whole thing. So that's how the pericopes work. That's how the lectionary works. Any questions about that part? All right. Got that done in about 10 minutes. I'm good, right on schedule here. All right, so let's start with the Old Testament, because I preached on the gospel, and you've already had a good dose of that, so we don't need to spend more time there. But we've got a few more things to say about that background. I like actually teaching this way, because when a pastor is prepping for a Sunday to preach, he usually looks at all the readings, thinks about them, kind of thinks about how the connections are, and he starts taking notes and ideas, and there's almost always more stuff than you can shove into a sermon. And so you have what I sometimes call the leftovers of your preparation. You know, the stuff that didn't make the cut. The cool story, or the interesting fact, or the cool Greek word. It just didn't make the cut. Left out, you know, off the margins. But now we get to do all that stuff. So I get to dig into some of that stuff. So it's kind of fun. All right, so let's start with our Old Testament reading. Then we're going to go to the Gospel. And if there's any time left over, and there might be, we'll see, we'll look at the Epistle. Now, the reason the Epistle is coming third on my list of priorities is because, interestingly enough, today's Epistle reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 6 was the very last lesson I taught here back in Lent. How about that? And so, because I did 2 Corinthians 4, 5, and teeny bit into 6 with you here, and so we don't need to do that again, even though I'm happy to. But we'll see how it goes. But we'll start with Job, and then we'll go into the gospel reading and see what more is going on there, and that's what I've got in your worksheet for you, and that's what's right here for us, and we're all set. All right, so Job. We're in chapter 38. What happened in the first 37 chapters of Job that we didn't read today that probably you're familiar with a little bit? So what do you know about the story of Job? What's going on in the first 37 chapters?
He lost essentially all his earthly things.
All right. Job lost essentially all of his earthly things. Who was Job? He was a very wealthy, very pious man living in the ancient Near East, and nobody knows much more about him than that. There's speculation. Some people think maybe he didn't really even exist. It's just a story somebody told. Some people think that Job is the oldest Old Testament book. Some people think it's one of the most recent. There's all kinds of debate. And it's hard to know things about the Old Testament because we don't have as many old manuscripts as we do the New Testament. Because Old Testament, the Jewish piety was that when you made a new copy of your Pentateuch or your copy of your Old Testament scriptures, you would destroy the old one. And you got your new one, destroy the old one so we don't have any confusion. And so we don't have many old ones around. So it's hard to know exactly the timing of Job, but it's a fascinating book because of how it plays out. So it's introduced with this challenge. Remember? God's in heaven, and he says, hey, Satan, you notice my guy Job down there? He's pretty cool. He worships me. He loves me. He's a pious man. He's awesome. I really like Job. He's pretty cool. So God's giving Job a great big thumbs up. And what does Satan say to God in response? Remember the story? He says, he's only doing that because you've blessed him so much. He's got lots of riches. He's got a great family. He's got a great job. He's got a happy life. He's just happy. That's why he loves you. You let me have some time with him, and we'll see what Job says. Let's do a little test. So what does God say? You're on. Let's do it. Fun for Job. So Job becomes the pawn in a divine bet. Because Satan's saying, I bet I can make Job curse you. And God says, try. Thanks, God. And Job's like, I love you, God. Thanks for putting me on the spot here. Thanks for having a little game with Satan over me. But that's exactly how the scenario plays out. It's not very fun for Job. Job doesn't know any of this. He's just a dude doing his thing. And then what happens? In the space of a day, everything falls apart. Tornado comes, wipes out his flocks. His kids are all having a party somewhere. The building collapses, kills them all. So his family's wiped out. His property is wiped out. All of his wealth is wiped out. He's only got one thing left. And what's the one thing left he's got in his life?
God and his wife.
His wife, yeah, his wife. We'll get God in a minute. He's got his wife. And what does the wife say? Job, you're an idiot. Curse God and die. Thanks, wife. This is awesome encouragement. And so it's like the wife is left because she's part of the curse. And so Sorry, I'm not saying anything about, marriage. It's a beautiful state by God. But Job's wife was not much help. And so she's adding to his agony, adding to the pain. And Job is sitting on the ash heap, scraping his sores because his body's afflicted. And so God says, you can do whatever you want to Job, but you can't kill him. So Satan says, all right. So he does it. And so Job is afflicted with pain and sores and illness, and he's sitting on the ash heap, scraping his sores with a broken piece of pottery and wishing he would die. And Job starts to wonder, what's going on? And what's the immediate question Job asks? God, what are you doing? I've served you. I've loved you. I've offered sacrifices. I give you all praise. What's going on? What's happening here? This is Job's question. Valid question? Seems pretty valid to me. And so then Job starts getting visited by his friends. And most of the book of Job is long poems. This is all Hebrew poetry. And these are long soliloquies, long poems of Job's friends telling Job what he needs to do to straighten this out. And they're saying, Job, you must have done something wrong. Come clean. What is it? What are you hiding? Come on. Because God's cursing you. So he's cursing you for a reason. What did you do wrong? And what is Job's continual refrain? Nothing. I've done nothing wrong. I'm innocent. I've done nothing wrong. Why is God doing this to me? Now, is Job right in saying I've done nothing wrong? Actually, he is. Now, you Lutherans are thinking, no, he's not perfect. No, he's good. No one's perfect. But see, if you go to there, you're going to miss the whole point of the story. Because the whole point of the story is God says, look at Job, Satan. He's a righteous man. He's right on track. I like him. So God affirms Job in his righteousness. So Job has got a legitimate beef. I'm playing it right, God. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Why aren't you doing your part? Why are you not blessing me? What's going on? So his friends say, because Job, you're lying. There's really something going on. You're really a scoundrel. And Job says, no, it's cool here. I'm not. And is Job right to say, no, I'm above boards? Yeah, he is. The point of the story is not, well, Job's really a sinner. He's just getting what he deserves. That's not the point at all. The point is, here's a guy doing it right, and what's God do to him anyway? Curses him. Sends him just short of hell. Wow. What's with that? And so Job, for 37 chapters, keeps on pushing back against his tormentors. Tormentors come say, Job, come on, come on. God is never unfaithful. God's not unjust. You deserve this for some reason. What is it? Job's like, no, there's nothing. There's nothing. And in fact, Job gets a little more insistent as we go along. I want God to come right down here and tell me what I did wrong. I dare him. Come down here, God. Show me where I'm wrong. That's how Job starts going. He gets a little bit fired up. He's ticked. Come on, God, come down here. Show me. And so he starts saying this. And the friends start saying, oh, Job, come on. No, this is what's going on. 37 chapters of this. And the basic gist of it is, here's Job, cursed by God, doesn't get it. He's angry at God, doesn't understand, and he wants God to come and show him where he's done wrong. But does Job defy or deny God? Never does. So does God win his bet? He does. God always wins his bets. So God knows about Job. He knows Job's going to hang in there. And Job does hang in there, no matter how bad it gets. But Job is still bewildered. He doesn't get it. He believes in God. He trusts him. He's got faith. But man, it's getting hard. It's hard. And he wants to know some explanation. I mean, come on, God. I trust you. Even here on this ash heap, even with all these sores, I still trust you. Give me a little help here. Help me understand. What's going on here? What is this? Is this to show your power? What is this? Give me some explanation. Give me some reason. Give me some understanding of why you're letting this happen. Give me something. And so that's 37 chapters. And now, in chapter 38, finally, God comes and speaks to Job. He does. He comes. Job gets what he wants. God, come down here. God says, all right, Job, I'm here. Now what? And that's where the text picks up. So, when you get this all in mind, the chapter 38 is pretty cool. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. So God comes to Job in a whirlwind, kind of a way that God makes himself known, the power and the wind and the so God shows up and he answers Job out of the whirlwind, and what does he say to Job? Who is this that darkens counsel. What's it mean to darken counsel?
Goes against the word.
Yeah, you're saying stupid stuff. It's like you're giving bad, you're talking nonsense. Good counsel is bright counsel. Dark counsel is like, what's that? So who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? So what's he already hinting at? What's Job's problem? Job doesn't know what he's talking about. Job doesn't know what's going on. He didn't know there was a bed up in heaven. Job doesn't know what he's talking about. So God is coming to poor Job, and as God said, no, Job, yeah, sorry. I had this bet with Satan. Sorry, you're kind of caught in the crosshairs. I'll make it up to you. No! God comes and says, Job, what's this I'm hearing? What's this about defying me? What's this about prove myself right? So, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? And then we get verse 3. Now gird up your loins like a man. What's that mean? What's it mean to gird up your loins? You guys have probably heard this before somewhere. Come on. To gird up your loins. What's it mean? Yeah. Yeah, put on your big boy pants. We might say it that way. So, literally girding up your loins. Remember, what did you wear in the ancient world? What did dudes wear? They had a tunic or a robe or flowing stuff, different names for it, different places, but they didn't have pants. They had basically a robe that went on, and it would hang down around ankle length. So if you're going to do anything serious, what have you got to do first? You got to get rid of all the junk around your legs because it gets in the way, so you would gird up your loins. So what you would do is you would take your robes and you would hike them up, fold them up halfway or something, and then cinch them up with your belt, and they'd be up out of the way. That's what it means to gird up your loins. You're really tying up your loins, the stuff around your loins, you're getting it up out of the way. So now it hits you maybe about mid-thigh, and it's up out of the way. A little bit, risque, a lot of legs showing, but at least you can do work now. So you can run, you can get things done. That's what it means to gird up your loins. It's fascinating because in India they still do this. In some parts of India, the guys like in the south wear something called a dhoti or a lungi, depending on how fancy it is. If it's white and nice, it's a dhoti. But for work, they wear a lungi. And a lungi is basically like a big wrap towel you put around your waist and tuck in, and you got a certain way of doing it, and it goes down to about mid-calf. But when the guys are going to do work, it's fascinating to watch them. They will pick up their lungi, and they'll flip the whole thing up halfway and then tuck it in. So now it's up to just above their knee, and now they can get down to work. And that's what you do with your lungi. And it's fun, too, because the guys, when they're bored, will sit around, they just play with their lungi. They just flap it around, fold it up, down, flap it around. Got to do something. You don't have pockets, you play with your lungi. But it's the same idea. So to gird up your loins is to get things up so you're ready. So put on your big boy pants. Let's get ready for business. So when God says to Job, gird up your loins like a man, what's he saying? Buck up. Get ready. Let's do this. You want a showdown? All right, I'm on it. Let's do it. So he's basically answering Job's challenge. You want me to come and he'll have a little face-to-face judge here? Let's do it. Let's do it. So gird up your loins, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. What is that, people? That is sarcasm. That is rich, dripping, nasty sarcasm. And people sometimes say, well, sarcasm is not appropriate to the Bible. Yeah, right. Talk to God about that. Because who's saying the sarcasm here? Yeah, God himself, Yahweh. So sarcasm, yeah, it has its place. Yes, it can be dangerous. Yes, it's nasty, all that stuff. But God's using it here. And this is sarcasm full blast. Gird up your loins. We're going to have a little challenge here. And you can just, and you teach me here, Job. Go ahead. Tell me what I need to know. Yeah, even when you hear that, what's your immediate visceral response? Oh, man. Whoops. Yeah, and so we're not even out of the gate, and already Job is like, talk about cringeworthy. Oh, man. So now God gets into his litany, and off we go. So then starting here at verse 4, God just starts unloading. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? So what's God talking about? Creation. Tell me if you have understanding. In other words, where were you? And where was Job when God created the earth? Wow, he's how many generations away from even being born or a thought. He's nowhere now around. He doesn't even exist. He's nothing. So God's there from the very beginning. And where are you, Job? Oh, yeah, that's right. I haven't made you yet. Loser. That's basically what it is. It's like Throw it out. And he's just throwing it down. But God is merciless here, frankly. He just piles it on. Now, it's just Hebrew poetry, and Hebrew poetry just likes to layer and layer and layer it on. And that's what we have here. Who set its measurements, since you know, more delicious sarcasm, or who stretched the line on it? So what do you mean to stretch the line on it? Yeah, measure it out. You know, it's like putting the line, the chalk line, snap it in place, get a nice straight line. Who did that? So God's talking like a builder. He built the earth, so he uses measurements. He's got his tape measure out. He's got his chalk line. He snaps it. Now we'd say he's got his laser level. You know, he's out there making sure everything's right. So who did this? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? So in other words, there were people there, the stars were there, and the saints and the angels in heaven, they were there. They're all shouting for joy because I'm creating and I'm doing it and I'm the one who made everything. So what Job is hearing from God, full blast, is, I'm the creator, you're nothing. All right. And so we go on. Or who enclosed the sea with doors? When bursting forth, it went out from the womb. So we have the idea of the sea being given birth, coming out of the womb. And the imagery here is strong because in childbirth it gets kind of messy, all right? And so you have the ocean, you know, bursting out of the womb and the sea is coming forth. And so it's this, out it comes. When I made a cloud its garment, so what he's thinking about is the ocean frothing up and foaming and making, you know, the mist coming up. So we make a cloud its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band. So the thick darkness in the ocean and the depths and how deep it goes, and it's so dark you can't see what's down there anymore. That's what's going on here. And I placed boundaries on it and set a bolt and doors, and I said, thus far you shall come, but no farther. What are the boundaries that God sets? The land, the shore. This is it. No more ocean. You can't come up here. So I'm making a beach. I'm making a cliff. That's it. These are the boundaries I'm setting. These are the doors that I'm bolting. And here shall your proud waves stop. So who did that? I did that. Now, this part is very interesting. This whole thing on the sea and the ocean. Why the big focus on the ocean? Why the focus on the water and the sea? What's going on with that? In the Old Testament, the ocean, the water, was always a very mysterious thing. Excuse me. A very mysterious thing because they knew that water was material and had substance, but it was weird. It didn't have any form. You know, you could pour it into stuff and you could do stuff. And it was one of the only things the Old Testament people knew about that was like that. And it was just like a mystery to them because here you can't control it, and yet it's something, but you can't get your hands around it. You can't grab it. You can't cut it. You can't manipulate it. It's got this own kind of life. And then you've got the waters and the ocean. And who can control that? It's just scary. What's out there? You know, weird things wash up onto the beach. Like, whoa, what weird thing is that? Look at that jellyfish. Oh, you know, creepy, weird stuff. What's out there? Oh, I don't know. Man. And people who would venture out in the boats, you know, storms come, you get killed, and strange beasts come up and kill you and eat you, and it's like all this mysterious stuff. And so you can't get very deep because you can only dive as far as you can hold your breath. What's down there? Who knows? So the ocean had this huge, mysterious quality for them, and this is across the board in the ancient Near East. Everybody had this understanding. The ocean was chaos. It was the tohu vavohu, which is the Hebrew for formless and void. It's just scary, and who controls it? And in fact, in the Hebrew mind, chaos and ocean were equivalent of evil and darkness and what's opposed to God. That's what the ocean was. So the ocean was the place where evil dwelt, and the things where scary, bad things happen, and the deep, and the Sheol, and the depths. That's, you know, it's scary stuff. So all that is imagery with the ocean. So the ocean had this very negative connotation in the Hebrew mind. So when God says, shut in the ocean, who put boundaries on it, what's God basically saying here in Job? What's the point? Exactly. I control the ocean. That ocean that scares the woolies out of you, I'm in control of it. I tell it where to go. I put the limits on it. It does what I want it to do. I'm the creator. It's my ocean. So God's saying. So this is a strong statement of God's absolute control over everything, even the forces of evil. God's in control. It's his ocean. He puts the limits on it. So this is a strong, strong statement of God's absolute sovereignty. All right? Now, the chapter keeps on going. And then it keeps on going to another chapter. And God just keeps on piling it on more and more and more. All this stuff in creation. He makes this. He makes that. He keeps on coming back to his rhetorical question. Where were you, Job, Where were you, Job, when I made the giraffe? Where were you when I made the lion? Where were you when I did this? Where were you, Job? And what's the powerful answer that Job has to come to? No, it was nowhere. All right, so that's the setup here. Questions at this stage? Anything so far? Yes, it does relate prior to the flood, where you have the ocean, the waters kind of come up before everything's kind of calm. After the flood, you have water being a little more scary and a little bit out of control. There's truth to that. And you also have the creation, God he's reining it in. Because remember, on day one, he makes the light, and then he separates the light from the dark, and then he separates the water from the land. He makes that distinction as well. So that's the control he's got from the very beginning. Yeah, question? Oh, already there.
I guess that's kind of part of it.
Yes, it is. You are right on track with that, but we'll save that for just a minute. But you're already way ahead of it. You're good because you're doing the pericope thing. What's the connection here? Well, the connection, obviously, exactly right, is who's in control of the water, and this is God's thing. Okay, good. All right, now, so we go on. Let's take a look. Let's see what I got here for you. Okay. Filling in some blanks, because I know that's important for you guys. Yahweh spends it, Yahweh, and what's Yahweh, by the way, just so we all on the same page here? That's God. What's the, sometimes translated as Jehovah, but Jehovah is really a mistranslation of the Hebrew. Yahweh comes closer, and this is God's divine name. Means more or less, I am. It's the name that God reveals to Moses at the burning bush. So this is God's special name, and it's the name that comes all the way through Job. So Yahweh spends a total of 4 chapters rebuking Job. 4 chapters. And so you got just 8 verses, a little taste of it. 4 chapters. Like I said, he just piles on to poor Job. He doesn't cut him any slack. So what's the clear gist of God's line of questions? What's the clear gist? I'm God, you're not. So he just reminds Job of the score. I'm God, you're just a creature. Come on, Job. Come on. So Job responds twice to God. And the poetry, it kind of splits it. So at chapter 40, Job speaks. And then 4 chapters of rebuke. And then Job speaks again. And so we get those. I got these for you here. Because I thought you might want to hear that. So in Job 40, this is after God has gone through his long litany. So then the Lord said to Job, will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? So who's the fault finder here? Yeah. Let him who reproves God answer it. So give me, okay, now it's your turn, Job. What you got? I've given you my case, your turn. So what do you have to say? Then Job answered the Lord and said, so what is Job going to say? Well, Job learns fast. Behold, I am insignificant. What can I reply to you? I lay my hand on my mouth. What's that mean? I'm shutting up. I know enough to shut up. Once I have spoken, I will not answer. Even twice, I will add nothing more. So he admits, yeah, I was talking a good line before, and I was blathering on. No more. Yeah, I'm done. So it's an awesome answer. It's an awesome answer. I'm insignificant. I lay my hand on my mouth. I'm done. So then, 2 more chapters, God reinforces it. And then chapter 42, then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this? Hides counsel without knowledge. And that's what God had told Job. He's quoting God's line back to him. So he knows God can do all things, and God does whatever he wants to do. And God has challenged Job. So now here's Job's answer. Therefore I have declared that which I did not understand. He admits it. I didn't know what I was talking about. Things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear now, and I will speak. I will ask you, and you will instruct me. That's what God had told him. And so Job's chastened. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I retract, and I repent in dust and ashes. So what is Job's response to God's 4 chapters of rebuke? He repents. I was wrong. So, was Job justified in trying to call God to account for what was going on in his life that was so wrong and unjust? What's the bottom line? No. Why not? Why is he not justified? Yeah, just have faith, don't worry about the waves. Why is Job not justified? Because God's in charge. Who's Job? He's an insignificant creature. It's never okay for a creature to challenge God. Now, we do it all the time, and you even hear people say, it's okay to be angry at God. Well, in one sense, yeah, in your dumb humanness you can do that. But ultimately, God's God, people. Who do you think you are? And that's exactly the message of Job. It's exactly the point. So it's a strong, humbling message. You're just a creature. Don't forget that. And Job gets it. He figures it out. He comes to the conclusion, all right. Now, this is chapter 42. It's the very tail end of the book. What happens next after Job repents? And it's so ironic. Here's Job sitting on the ash heap, scraping his sores, and what's he do? He repents. He goes a little deeper, a little lower in his humiliation, and he says, you're right. I need to own this. I was out of line. You can do what you want, God. You can curse me. You can do anything you want to me. The very fact that I'm alive is just by your grace anyway. I've got nothing to say to you because you're God, and I was out of line. Sorry. This is a lesson that's hard for us to learn because in our humanness, we always want to, come on, God, you know what you're doing? And the answer is always the same. I'm God, you're not. This is hard. So, Job comes clean, and he repents, and what happens next? Who remembers the story? All right, God blesses him even more, restores his children, he's got even more kids, restores his camels and his donkeys and his sheep, and his flocks are vastly bigger than they were before, and he's the wealthiest, most blessed man in all of Mesopotamia, and happy life. And then Job has to go and pray for his stupid friends who had said wrong things about God, and God says, you know, maybe Job will pray for you and offer sacrifice, and I'll let you guys off the hook, you idiots. And that's how the book ends. And so Job offers sacrifice, and the story's over. Done. Book of Job. It's an awesome book. It's just an awesome book. Now, the problem is this. How do these words resolve the problem of injustice and suffering? Job says, I repent, cover my mouth. How does this resolve the problem of the injustice and Job's unjust suffering? How does this solve it? It points out our place. Does it solve the problem? Not in the least. Not in the least. Yeah, there's no problem. What do you mean problem? Problem's all on your side, dude. Yes. Right. Satan's limited, and you can't take his life. So God limits, this is the very beginning when the bed is made. You can't take his life. You can do whatever you want to Job, but you can't touch his life. This is literally what it says. So you can't do that. So yeah, God keeps his protection around Job. That's there. All right? Now, so the deep question is this. What does Job teach us about our continuing questions and problems about suffering and injustice and evil in the world? Do these problems linger yet today, 21st century? People still wonder about this stuff? Or do bad things happen to good people? Why is there injustice in the world? Why do innocent children suffer and die? Why is there famine? Why is there drought? Why does God do that? Why does God let a disaster happen? Why? Ever heard that stuff? All the time. Ever wonder it? All the time. And so how does Job answer this problem? It doesn't. It doesn't. Job is the book in the Bible that takes this problem on by the horns. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's ask the question. Let's go for it. And that's exactly the whole point of 37 chapters. Lay it out. Let's go for it. And what's the bottom line answer? No answer. Not going to tell you. I'm God. There's no gospel. You just heard it. The closest you get to gospel is God restoring Job's fortunes. But the book of Job is not about, I would argue the point of Job is not to declare the gospel love of God. That's not the point. The point of Job is something very different. The point of Job is to make clear what it means to be creature and what it means to have a God and coming clean with that. That's it. Yeah, so the gospel, the way you're looking for it, you're not going to find a lot of it. You can finagle it in. Any preacher can pull that off, but it's not there overtly. Yes, that's pretty much the lesson. Shut up and repent. And this is hard because, like I said, man, in our humanness, we get ourselves into situations where we see things happening. We think, they shouldn't have to repent. They're innocent. And yet the answer is the same. You're just a creature. You're just a creature. You let God be God. No, there is a profound comfort in this because creatures need to remember that they're just creatures. And when you remember that, you don't have to do the God thing anymore. You let God be God. And you don't have to figure it out. And I'd agree, there is comfort there. But it's a very mature sort of comfort. It doesn't come easy because you've got to be willing to say, who am I? What am I? My judgment doesn't matter. And this is maybe the biggest lesson I want us to see. Usually when people are asking questions about, how's that fair? How's that right? What they're doing is they're imposing their human judgment on the situation and assuming it's the last word. And that's always a mistake because God is not accountable to our judgment. What we think is fair, whatever. You could have the whole world agreeing with you that you're right and this is just. God's still God. And he is not beholden to our definitions of fair and right. And Luther wrestled with this. And that's why Luther concluded, right now we don't get it. But at the second coming of Christ, when all things are restored, even these things that don't make sense to us, even that'll fall into place. It'll be all right. Just keep trusting God. And that's the huge driving point of Job is you live in this relationship where you let God be God and trust him. That's what's going on here. So the problem of suffering, the problem of evil, there is no answer. And I encourage you, exhort you, don't try to give answers. Christians play this game all the time. Some terrible tragedy hits some nice family. And what do people start doing? Well, God's doing this so that. Or look at the witness you get to give. Or God will bless you even more. Or God needed them more than you needed them. And people say stupid, stupid things because they're trying to make sense of God. So what do you say in those horrible situations? I don't know. I don't know why this happened. I don't know how this fits into God's plan. I'm not God. But here's what I do know. And here's where the gospel kicks in. Even better than Job had. I know that God loves us enough to send Jesus. And Jesus died. And he rose. And he's promised to make all things new. And he will. And why this evil is happening now and why God lets it linger on, I don't know. I wish he didn't. I hate it as much as you do. But I know that Christ will make all things new. I'm hanging on to that. Let's do that together. That's what Christians need to say. That's our witness to the world. We don't have explanations for evil. We can't make it all come out neat and clean. We can't make God look just. And it's not your job to make God look better. Just let God be God. You speak of what you know. And quit trying to fill in the gaps for God. It's called, we have a name for this actually in theology and in philosophy. It's called theodicy. Theodicy is the practice of trying to justify God. You see the theos, that means God in Greek, and dikaiō means justice or just. So a theodicy is trying to justify God. Well, God's doing this because, or God's letting this happen so that. That's a theodicy. And Christians have been playing theodicy games for centuries. We shouldn't do it. Instead, we should just say, God's God, let God be God, and let's speak of the gospel I do know. And how does this work out in God's plan? I don't know. What's just about this? Nothing that I can see. But God's still in control, and I'll trust him. That's what Christians should do, and we shouldn't get into the theodicy game. That's what Job teaches us. So what's the big lesson Job learns? Let God be God. And you don't need to answer him. All right. Final thoughts or questions on Job? We did it. 30 minutes and we covered all of Job. Pretty cool. Job is an awesome book. It just really is. And you just keep in mind the overarching thread of what's going on, and it all kind of starts to make sense. Because otherwise you can get really bogged down in the middle of it and kind of lose track of what's going on. Keep the big picture. All right, so we've already got it. What's the connection then between the Old Testament and the gospel reading? What are the connections?
Don't worry about what's happening now.
All right.
You know the end of the game.
All right, don't worry about what's happening now. You know the end of the game. That's kind of the broad, big picture. What's probably the more immediate connection we've got going on here? God is in control. There are more connections, even more specific. What's that? Jesus actually being God. And how does he prove it? Controlling the ocean, controlling the water. You see, it's the obvious connection. The Creator is the one who barred the ocean, kept it in its limits, set the limits. And so then what does Jesus come and do? He says to the ocean, to the water, the Sea of Galilee, knock it off. Cool it. And what's the ocean do? Or what's the sea do? It cools it. Like that. See, that's the thing that it always blows my mind. I'm putting this out in the sermon. When Jesus says, in Greek it's just two words, siapo, be still. Silence, be still. Boom, boom. Two imperatives. Boom, boom. And what happens? Done. And this is not how it works in life. Right? It's not how it works. You see, even if, it's so cool because it's in the Greek, it's very literal. And there was a great calm. Bam. See, even if God stops the wind, what does the water do? Yeah, it keeps on swashing around for a while. You guys ever been on a little lake after a storm? You know, how long does it take the waves to settle back down? An hour, a couple of hours before things kind of settle back down again. You know, I got to get back to level. But Jesus says, silent, boom, flat water. What? So the disciples are blown away, totally freaked out. This is God's stuff. And who did it? Jesus. What? You see, we need to remember this. Even for the disciples to confess, you are the Messiah, that doesn't mean he's God. That was not on the job description of Messiah. Messiah was son of David, the one who's going to come and restore Israel, the one who's going to conquer, as all that cool stuff. But David was just a dude. And so most people thought that's what the Messiah was going to be, a new David. The idea that the Messiah comes, cool, and he's God, whoa, didn't see that coming. And so that's why the disciples are wrestling for the whole ministry of Jesus, trying to put this together. How can he, okay, he's a guy, he's a prophet. I think he's even the Messiah. But God, whoa, how can that be? How can it be? And that's the whole dilemma they're having. That's why they stand there and say, who is this? Because they know it's got to be God, but it can't be God. Because God's up there. He's not. There he is. That's what their struggle is. That's their problem. They're trying to figure out how can you have a guy and God all at once. And so Mark 4, I love this text. Frankly, it's one of my favorite texts in all of Mark. I just love this little story because of all that's going on here and what it's saying about who Christ is and how the disciples react. So that's what's going on. So why was this text picked for this Sunday? Because it's next on the list in the Gospel of Mark. That's all it is. We're just going through Mark chapter 4, got one more little section. Okay, next week we're into 5. Let's keep going. So that's all. It's not like this Sunday we have to hear this reading. No, it's just how it happens. Now, what does this text teach us about? It teaches us a ton of Christology. And Christology is nothing more than the fancy, heavy-duty theological term for the study of Christ. Yeah. The study of Christ. And who is Christ? And the key that we get in Christology is the identity of Jesus. And what we learn here then is that Jesus is true God and true man. And what's the ratio? You guys have heard this countless times. 100% God and how much man? 100%. So we've got 100%, 100%, which again we're defying math and we're defying logic. Sorry, this is how God works. And see, there's a commonality too. Job doesn't need to have neat, clean answers. God just does what God does. Same thing here. God just does what God does. Just deal with it. What time do I need to wrap up again, Justin? About 2 minutes? Okay, I'll try to do that. And so we have God is just being God, and the Christology is that Jesus is fully God and fully man in one person. And so Mark just shows it so beautifully. Here's Jesus worn out, asleep in the back of the boat, like a guy. God doesn't sleep. Jesus does. He's tired out. And he's got a voice to speak. And But he speaks with the power of God. And in Greek and in theology, we have three genera here. We have the genus idiomaticum, genus apotalismaticum, and genus monostaticum, all going on here at once. And this is a cool text because it's all rich with all this theology happening. Why is the identity of Jesus such an important point? Why does this matter? Well, it's kind of the whole point of the entire gospel. If Jesus is God, then when he dies on the cross, wow, what's going on here? And when he speaks with authority, he speaks with authority. You better listen. And when he says he is the way, the truth, and life, you better listen because he's God, for crying out loud. This means take him seriously. That's why the identity matters, and that's why this story matters, because it's just screaming at the disciples, he's God. He is God. Jehovah's Witnesses insist, no, he never said that he was God. Give me a break. He says it all over the place, screams it in the Gospels, and that's exactly what's going on here. He's God, full blast. He is who he says he is. And what difference does this make for our lives this week?
When we start getting too much into ourselves.
Yeah, remember who you are. Remember who Christ is. And remember, he is who he says. Come on, live like his disciple. Maybe we should say that in the sermon. All right, time's up. Let's close with a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord God, for this morning and for your rich word that just engages us and teaches us so much about our reality and about your truth. Help us to live in that reality this week. Give us your guidance and your direction that we live as your confident disciples, confessing you as Lord. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. Blessings on your week.